Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and today I am doing both the Monsterathon Tag and also a TBR, meaning that I will be telling you what I'm going to read for as many as possible of the prompts of the Monsterathon readathon, and I will also be giving you a recommendation for each prompt that I will not be reading. So the Monsterathon, I believe, was originated by Chapter Kate, who is a booktuber who I really love, and is being hosted by 6 people. I'll put an introduction and all the links to everybody and all the information below, but basically there are 3 groups who are competing and I am one of the beasts. I don't remember who the 2 hosts of the beasts are, but I'll put that information below as well. Hopefully at this late date y'all already know all about it. But what with the readathon being a month long, hopefully you might actually find some of these recommendations useful. Some of my books aren't coming in from the library for a couple of weeks. A couple of housekeeping bits. One, there will be another art video coming out on Tuesday. I didn't put one out in my normal time range last time because I was depressed, but I've got one ready now to go up on Tuesday. And also, sorry if I seem a little less animated in this video than usual. I had a chiropractor's appointment yesterday and I'm not allowed to cross my legs or lean until my next one, and probably for quite a while after that. And I really love doing both of those things, so I might be a bit in my chair for this. While I'm editing, I get to see how many times I mess that up, because I definitely crossed my legs multiple times while putting on my makeup because I wasn't concentrating. Also, that's why the lighting is definitely brighter on this side of my face. The light that usually comes from the window isn't here because it's not the correct time of day, because I didn't have time during the correct time of day and won't until the end of the month. So this is what you get. So, Monsterathon Challenge 1, Classic Creepers. This is to read a book with a classic horror monster in it, which would be like vampires, werewolves, ghosts, Frankenstein, etc. And I picked one of the earlier books about werewolves, which is The Werewolf of Paris by Guy Endor. When was this originally from? 1933. Quite old. And I wanted to read this one because it should be really interesting. It's old. I really like reading old fantasy type books because as a writer and a reader, I like to understand why people write today the way that they do. Also, almost all of the modern books about werewolves are romances, which I don't like. I'm actually going to recommend another werewolf book because I haven't read these ones, but my mom reads all of them, and that is Pridemate by, I'm gonna put it here, why am I always so unprepared? But it is a romance series, but it's not a formulaic one that's really lazy, as they sometimes can be. The world building, a lot of work went into it, and it's quite good, and since my mom reads it, I know it must have really good secondary platonic relationships in it, and she has raved to me about it, so I'm gonna wreck that. Challenge 2 is What Big Eyes You Have. This is to read a book over 400 pages, and hopefully for that I will be reading Prior of the Orange Tree. I don't have that to waft at you because it was overdue to the library because I got it early for the last readathon, Femme Fatale, and didn't read it. Hopefully I'll be able to get either the print copy or the ebook copy back from the library before the readathon is over. For a recommendation for that, I have to put forward A Turn of Light by Julie E. Cerneda. It is a fantasy and also romance. It's really interesting. I'll link my review of it below. It's got really cool magic and interesting fantasy creatures in it, including some monsters. Challenge 3 is Chimera, which is to read a book that could fall under multiple genres, and for that I'll be reading Dune, which I also don't have to waft because it's one of the ones that's coming in later from the library. And I picked Dune partially because it was on Chapter Kate's Monsterathon book tag, and which reminded me of its existence. But what I remember about it is that it was written back when fantasy and sci-fi were one genre. And so now it has both magic and sci-fi elements, so it is in both genres, basically because back in ye olden days of like the 70s or earlier, they were considered the same, so people just put magic and science fiction together. So I am hoping it'll be another informative about like how the genres came to be. But my recommendation for that is one of the ones I have a hardest time with, because genres can be so hard to define. Like, is romance a genre? And therefore, if something is both a romance and a fantasy, does that have two genres? Or is romance just a thing that's in different books? And also, is Regency era a genre? Because if it is, these are fantasy set in the Regency era. This is the Temporary series by Naomi Novik, and it's really good. I'll link below my raving about that series. But if romance is considered a genre, separate from fantasy, basically all my books are fantasy, and then sometimes some other stuff in them. But if romance is considered a genre, then Uprooted, which is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, would be in that. So with those, obviously, Court of Such and Such series. Voyage of the Dawn Treader is both Christian fiction and fantasy. I don't know how genres work, so take what you will from that. But challenge 4 is The Real Monsters, which is to read a book with monstrous humans, which I have here. The Library of Fates, which, depending on whether a book that I have on request comes through or not, this might be for that prompt, or I might use it for the Angry Mob prompt, because this was all over Bookstagram and also a couple of booktubers, and it involves a library. A queen or something of the sorts being ousted and having to decide what she's going to do about that, basically, from what I have heard. I'll link some of the reviews of this below so you can see if it's something you might want to check out, but apparently it has some very nasty people in it. For my recommendation for that, A Language of Thorns. Definitely very good for that. Also very good for Halloween-y, creepy reading in general. Very good for that. Most everybody has heard of it, but it is a retelling of some lesser retold fairy tales, and it turns a lot of them on their head so that the bad guys are the people instead of the monsters. Really cool. Also, the prose is gorgeous, and there's a lot of really gorgeous artwork. Prompt number 5 is Unsightly, which is to read a manga with monsters in it, and so for that I chose these, or at least one of these, because I'm going to use one of them for another different prompt. I've requested 6 of them because I figure once I start reading them I'll want to read more, and mangas are a quick way to get up a page count, which is another thing that's being counted in the readathon. And this is one of my favorite animes. I've never read the manga. It has demons in them, except they're not mean demons. They're nine-tailed foxes and snake spirits, which is what this guy is. Don't judge me for saying that this is one of my favorite animes. If you watch it, it's very anime-ish. I would not recommend it as a first anime. It's pretty weird, and there's a lot of jokes you will think are just weird and not funny if you're not really into anime. But the characters are really lovable, and I really love the very interesting world and the vastly different mythos that is being used as opposed to all the European mythos that are in a lot of the books I read. I read hardly any manga or graphic novels. Ooh, but this series has monsters in it, Gunnar Craig Court, and the only reason I'm not reading it for the readathon is that I don't have the first book. I got like the second or third book at a used book sale. So, and I like to read them in order when I finally get around to reading them. But I have had a look-see through, and they have ghosts and what's that? Whatever that is. So quite good for this readathon, I think. Then we have the Angry Mob prompt, which will hopefully be Sorcery of Thorns, I believe is the book, which I wanted to read for Femme Fatale, but like 6 other people had requested it before me, so that wasn't gonna happen, but it might still come through in time for this readathon. So many people were reading this and liked it so much, and there's books or grimoire specifically that like eat people. Sounds really interesting, and I'll link reviews of that below as well, because I'm not good at explaining that quickly. Plus I haven't actually read it, but so many people were recommending that. And for a recommendation, I don't know who you've been watching, but I've definitely seen more than one person recommending Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, which is another one I'm reading for a separate for a read-along rather than a readathon. And it's quite chill, and it's going to last through September into half of October, I think. But Robin Hobb's work has been all over BookTube and Bookstagram, so that might be one you might want to try. Challenge 7 is Sacrifice, which is to read a book that was in someone else's unhaul. And for that I am reading The Sleeper and the Spindle, which I'm fairly certain is a Sleeping Beauty retelling. And I think it's queer. From looking at the pictures, it definitely had 2 women kissing. But it is illustrated quite gorgeously, and I saw it in an unhaul by Spinster's Library, and she liked it. She just probably wasn't going to read it all that much because she's not all that into art, but I really am, so I would probably end up buying this. It is by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Chris Riddle. I've never done an unhaul, and I rarely watch them, so not sure what to recommend you for that. Challenge 7 is The Beast, which is of course my group, but you can complete the challenges for all the groups, and that is to read a book with a character with animal characteristics. So for that I'm going to be reading another of the Kami-sama Kiss series. Who's that by? Story and art by Julieta Suzuki. Oh cool. I could read that for a femme fatale too sometime. Challenge 9 is The Haunts, and that is to read a book with a dead or undead character. And for that I was going to read a book that I really enjoyed in the first femme fatale readathon, which was Heart's Blood by this author, Juliette Marillier, or Marillier, I don't know how to say her name, but I absolutely love that. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, quite an original one in my opinion, and it has a whole ton of ghosts in it. I'm also going to link you to a video recommending that below because it was freaking good and you should read it. Granted, I know a lot of people don't like Beauty and the Beast retellings, but I really do. Basically because it's about people falling in love because one of them likes to read and the other one, and she reads to the other one / teaches the other one how to write. Plus one of them is horrendously socially awkward. You know, I can't resist that. So that is going to be my rec for this one, because I decided with all the other books I'm going to be reading, I need to read something short. So I'm going to read this. Isle of the Dead by Emily Rada, my favoritist author from when I was a little kid. It's part of the Dragons of Del Toro series, which is the 3rd in the Del Toro franchise, world, whatever. But it's got a boatload of ghosts, literally. I can't be bothered to put that back correctly. But challenge 10 is to read a book with a alien, robot, or sci-fi based creature, and for that I'm reading The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. I literally just typed robot into my library search engine and this is what came up that I thought looked good. But it is about a robot who wakes up in a strange land and all by herself and has to figure out how to survive there. And I thought I didn't have any recs for this because I really hardly ever read sci-fi, but actually Cress and Cinder and Scarlet and such are part of a series that is, I guess, another one that actually mixes fantasy and sci-fi, so that's another rec for that. But also for this, that it's got at least one cyborg in it and some androids. So that is my Monsterathon TBR and my Rex for Monsterathon. I'm also going to be playing around with some monster reference books like Monsterology. Is that it? Yeah, Monsterology. And over there there's one about sea monsters. It's about mermaids, but also sirens and stuff. And then Del Toro Book of Monsters and stuff like that. I'm also going to be reading, and I'm also going to be watching movies with monsters and with monstrous humans like Hunchback of Notre Dame. I love the Disney version of that. Also, I'm going to be watching a bunch of animes that have monsters in them and things like that, and I'm going to be vlogging about it and telling you all about my thoughts on monsters and how they are portrayed in fiction. So look forward to that. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!